We see loads of conspiracies nowadays in football, whether that's Bournemouth only play at night or Terrell Malacia never actually existed. But one conspiracy that I'm strapping the tinfoil hat on is that a lot of Premier League managers will sacrifice wins due to their style of play. We've seen the word style of play get thrown around over the last few years, and that's mainly due to Erik ten Hag. I think that's why partially he got sacked, because he didn't have an identity within the team. You'll see that word everywhere. What is the club's identity? And I do get it. If you think of Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp or Mourinho, you can close your eyes and, for better or for worse, you can imagine what kind of football they're going to set their teams up to play. And in today's game, where the tactics have just gone into another stratosphere, you have to have an identity. But in 2024, it's not sexy to play dice ball. It's not cool to play 4-4-2. You can't play in the mixer. You can't play let him know you're there early doors ball. You have to be able to win, but you also have to quote unquote win in the right way, which then limits you and therefore increases this conspiracy theory. The main people I'm talking about are the lower teams in the league, mainly the promoted managers, and I think who else can we start with other than Vincent Kompany? City legend, he started his managerial career and he's had a pretty good career so far. He's managed Anderlecht, he's managed Burnley, and then he went to Bayern Munich, which just shocks the world. I mean, he wasn't the second or third or fourth or maybe even fifth choice, but he was a choice. And he's doing a good job so far. They haven't lost in the league. I know they've had a few results in the Champions League, but he hasn't failed as quickly as everyone thought he was gonna. But it was interesting because he was awful at Burnley in the Premier League. I know Burnley fans will say they were brilliant in the Championship, and yes, I know they are, they dominated that league. But if we look in the Premier League, they just couldn't adapt. And especially at the back end of last season, they were dreadful. The only reason, in my opinion, why they got any points was through Muric, who now plays for Ipswich. He was saving them so much, and once they dropped Trafford, they finally began to keep a couple of clean sheets. But the big question was, why didn't Kompany change his style of play? That was the constant thing that all the pundits were saying, why isn't he changing? Because they kept on losing, they scored the second least amount of goals in the league, but the way they played never wavered, and I think this ultimately led to their demise. They constantly played out from the back, they played possession football, and yes, it was aesthetically pleasing if they had the right players. Someone like Odebert, who moved to Spurs in the summer, he was brilliant, but he was one out of 3 or 4 players who could keep up with that type of football. And like I say, yeah, if they did have better players, if they had a bigger budget, then potentially Kompany could have done, more with Burnley. But unfortunately he didn't. He had to deal with the resources that he had at hand. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the players, you don't have the players. So therefore, why don't you set up in a different way? I mean, out of the 3 teams that went down, Sheffield United, Luton and Burnley, Kompany was definitely trying to play like Pep the most out of the 3, wasn't he? Rob Edwards had a great time at Luton and they were unlucky to go down, but unfortunately they just didn't have the players, and the Sheffield United were one of the worst teams we've ever seen. But you look at Burnley, they were 12th in possession over the course of the season, and they had 4,000 more touches than Sheffield United and 3,000 more touches than Luton, which, yeah, is my favourite thing to do. Manipulate stats to back up my argument, but it does paint some sort of a picture that Burnley had a lot of the ball during their time there. I think they averaged about 47% possession in each game, which you look at, only really the top 6, top 8 teams average over 50%. And what if Burnley stayed up if before bed Vincent Kompany went to pray and looked up Sam Allardyce and Sean Dyche and even maybe Tony Pulis and asked them for the strength to play a low block? I mean, you don't know. You could probably argue yes, because unfortunately that is the way that you get points in the league. When you just tire out teams, you play a low block, and if you get a win and then a draw every now and again, like someone like Everton did last season with, of course, the Messiah himself. But clearly, Kompany wanted to showcase the way he coached a team. At the end of the day, it was a bit of a trial for him, wasn't it? He was never going to stay at Burnley. He was one of Pep's proteges, and we're seeing people like Maresca doing brilliant at Chelsea, we're seeing Arteta doing brilliant at Arsenal, and now he's doing brilliant at Bayern Munich. Like I say, if he wavered, would he have stayed at Burnley? Potentially, he might still be there. But I can tell you what, 100% if he did move his style of play to a low block, he would not be managing Bayern Munich today. I mean, let's even take this season with the newly promoted managers, Kieran McKenna and Russell Martin, Ipswich and Southampton, and they are both playing fairly expansive football. I'd say Ipswich are doing a better job of it at the moment. Last Sunday they drew against Man United, whereas Southampton unfortunately lost against Liverpool. But this brings up the debate. Southampton were very attacking against the top of the league. Liverpool are one of the best teams in the world at the moment, and Southampton came and gave it to them. Diblin was brilliant. I mean, he's going to be a star for years to come. And it worked for a bit. It worked because Liverpool were taken back with it, and they didn't know how to defend Southampton. But as we've seen it so many times, when a team just constantly is doing that, they can't keep up with the physicalness and the fitness, but just also the pace and the speed and the counter-attackingness of these top teams. And we saw Liverpool come back, and they eventually won the game. And that was the same with the Ipswich game, the first game of the season. Kieran McKenna's first Premier League game. It was Ipswich's first Premier League game in over 20 years. And they were brilliant in the first half. They took it to them. Liam Delap was fantastic. Amari Hutchinson was brilliant. As we saw in the game, they got more tired. And then on the counter-attack, Leif Davis lost concentration and Mo Salah scored. Again, I can't say that if Ipswich and Southampton played a low block, I can't say if they frustrated Liverpool and other teams, then they would have won. Because you can see it with Ipswich against Spurs. Ipswich went to the Tottenham Stadium and they won. They smashed them. But we've seen it so many times that eventually the wheels fall off, the momentum falls off, and with Southampton, the wheels haven't even been put on yet. And naturally, in January, February, Ipswich are unfortunately going to be down there. I'll be surprised if they're not. I'll be really happy if they're not. But we've seen it so many times. Luton last season were a great example. And this is continuing the trend of the newly promoted teams going up and then straight back down. Look, I don't think it's up for debate that football teams, they want an attractive coach, because if you want to get to the boring part of it, essentially the businesses and these American owners, these Saudi owners, they don't want boring football because it brings less eyes to the game. But if we're also looking at it in a fan sense, they want to promote good football to the fans as well. And it's the age-old debate, what's better, attractive football or winning football? And sometimes the two can be on the same plate, because you have Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, Carlo Ancelotti, but then you can have someone like a Jose Mourinho, who's aged very well, but we all remember those Chelsea years where it was so boring to watch. I mean, really, it's a fan's preference. I really like attacking football, and that's why I like watching Ipswich this season, because they just are going out against teams. However, you might talk to some Ipswich fans, and they might want to stay in the Premier League and see the team in the top flight for years and years to come. And unfortunately, that's going to be really hard with the way they play. I mean, is Marcelo Bielsa the best example of this? They were brilliant Leeds in that season. I mean, in the Championship they were great, and then they came up and they just took everyone by storm. Shame it was in lockdown, but they were so energetic. You know, you had murd ball in training where the ball would never go out of play and you always had to keep on running. And we saw that because Leeds ultimately got into the top 10 with a underwhelming squad on paper. But naturally, the second season where players started to break down, Calvin Phillips got injured, Rafinha got injured, and he's put in an awkward situation. You then saw Bielsa not change. He didn't change the way he played, and if anything, he doubled down and continued to play like that, but with worse players, because obviously his star players were injured for months. And the result of that, he put Leeds on a down spiral towards the Championship. And Leeds fans can say whatever they want. I know they wanted Bielsa back last season, and he's an absolute icon of the city, never mind just the club. But at the time, it wasn't a majority feeling that how dare you sack him. I think people were upset that he was going just because he meant so much to the city. However, people liked when Jesse Marsh kept them up that season against Brentford. So I suppose you got to ask, is a manager selfish for wanting to essentially preserve his career and promote himself to a better team with better football in a ruthless, no loyalty based industry? And personally, I don't think he is. From what I can see, football is ruthless. There's no loyalty in it whatsoever, and the people who say there are, they've got their head in the clouds, basically. Kieran McKenna, at the end of the day, I'm sure he loves Ipswich, but he wants to progress his career. He doesn't want to stay in Ipswich for the rest of his career because he's clearly a better manager than the level he is at now. But I can tell you what, if he has one or two bad seasons, he gets relegated maybe, and then they're in the bottom half of the Championship, don't think the same loyalty will be shown to him. But on the other hand, is a fan or the club selfish wanting their team to stay in the top flight in England? And again, no, everyone wants what's best for them and what's best for their interests. Unfortunately, I think, like I say, with the manager, with the football business, but especially with managers, the life cycle is so short nowadays. When I was younger, or even before me in the 90s and 80s, it was about 5 years some average manager will stay at the club. Nowadays, if you don't progress the team or you have an identity, then you're out at the job centre showing all these clubs videos of how you played like Pep Guardiola for 10 minutes in a game. So why would you blame these managers for essentially putting their interest before the club's? I know that sounds a bit unpopular, but it's reality at the end of the day. I think for a neutral fan, it's Great to see more attacking football. I think that's only going to progress because as we see someone like a Maresca go from Leicester to Chelsea and then potentially pushing for the Champions League, it shows that there is a bit of a pathway if you play the right football. But naturally, I think these promoted teams then will go back down because they don't have the players to play the football that they want to play, and then the managers will leave, and then the newly promoted teams who then get relegated will be in a worse position, and it's a bit of a cycle that I don't think will ever stop. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you think this is a conspiracy, if you think this is just obvious, or if you think these managers are trying to progress these clubs just with better football. Leave a comment below. If you could leave a like, that'd be great. And if you subscribe to the channel, fantastic. But thanks for watching.